Imagine an empire built on sun-soaked beaches, booming vacation homes, global flight paths, and the promise of endless growth. That empire is none other than the state of Florida, the so-called Sunshine State, whose economy depends heavily on leisure, real estate, and tourism. But what if I told you that today, beneath the palm tree facade, something is cracking? Let's pull back the curtain. In recent years, Florida has set new records in visitor numbers. In the second quarter of 2025 alone, the state welcomed 34.4 million travelers, a headline-grabbing milestone. On the surface, it looks like business as usual. Yet scratch the glossy surface and a darker narrative emerges. While domestic visitors continue pouring in, one of Florida's most crucial segments, the long-stay snowbirds from Canada, has collapsed. In Q2 2025, Canadian visitation dropped to about 640,000, a roughly 20% decline year-over-year. Meanwhile, hotel occupancy, restaurant check-ins, and boardwalk traffic in beach towns are all showing signs of fatigue. Some local businesses report being 30% down from the same period last year. Here lies the paradox. Record visitation numbers on paper, yet many local economies are bleeding. Why the disconnect? Because not all visitors are equal. A one-night stopover at a hotel and a long-term condo rental by a Canadian retiree have radically different economic impact, but both may be counted as visitors. The consequence: communities built around the budget of repeat winter guests are exposed as the foundation shifts. And when that foundation cracks, the ripple effects are enormous. What triggered this perfect storm? Multiple forces converged: rising costs for homeowners insurance, escalating condo/hotel fees, hurricanes carved out of the Gulf and Atlantic, aggressive immigration rhetoric, weakened inbound travel from key markets. Over time, the risk profile for Florida as a destination has shifted, and the market is responding. In this story we'll chart 3 acts: the building of Florida's boom, the onset of collapse signals in real time, and the possible future scenarios. Because the question isn't just, is Florida in trouble? But rather, is this the beginning of the biggest collapse in U.S. state history? The booming foundation under strain. Florida's boom was no accident. With sunny weather year-round, favorable tax structures, absence of a state income tax, and a robust inbound flow of tourism and new residents, the state built a massive real estate and hospitality machine. The economy of Florida is now the 4th largest of any U.S. state, standing at over $1.7 trillion in gross state product as of 2024. One pillar was the so-called snowbird economy, Canadians fleeing winter, renting condos, spending in restaurants, shopping in local stores, often for months at a time. But those patterns began to shift. In mid-2025, the data began showing red flags. Canadian visitor numbers dropped steeply, part political backlash, part economic calculus. According to public data, overseas visitors rose slightly, but the Canadian share fell to 1.9% of Q2 traffic. At the same time, some beach town economies reported vacant hotels and boardwalks usually buzzing at this time of year. In some regions, the story isn't of rebound, but of plateau or retreat. And while headline numbers still showed record visitation statewide, those numbers mask uneven geography and composition. Behind this shift are structural pressures: housing insurance rates soaring after major hurricanes, condo association fees climbing, more frequent storm risk, older visitors reassessing long stays, global travel markets reorienting, tighter visa rules, rising U.S. dollar making travel costlier. According to experts at tourism economics and academic institutions, these combined create a perfect storm scenario for destinations with high vulnerability and heavy dependence on long-haul, long-stay guests. But the bigger issue: when a tourism engine is built on high-spend, long-stay visitors, and the front-end numbers shift, the whole machine sputters. For Florida, that means entire communities that counted on winter visitors may face a revenue collapse. Hotels lose room nights, restaurants lose repeat dinner business, shops lose tenants who sublet condos, local tax revenue falls. In that sense, what we're seeing isn't just a tourism slowdown, it may be a systemic fracture. In the next section, we'll explore how this fracture is playing out in real time across sectors: real estate, hospitality, labor, and ask the hard question: can Florida recover, or is this the beginning of a long-term descent? The unraveling: when the sunshine turns to shadow. The illusion of endless growth never lasts forever. Beneath Florida's glittering skyline, the first real cracks are spreading, not just in concrete, but in the state's financial core. In late 2025, insurance companies began pulling out of the market at a record pace, leaving homeowners and small business owners scrambling for coverage. Premiums doubled, tripled, and in some cases, vanished entirely. This isn't just a paperwork issue. It's the lifeblood of property ownership in a hurricane-prone state. When people can't insure their homes, they can't sell them, can't rebuild, can't move forward. And so, the once booming housing market begins to suffocate under its own weight. Reports from Miami to Fort Myers show listings piling up while buyers disappear. Investors who once rushed to flip beachfront condos are quietly exiting the scene, leaving ghost towers behind. In coastal towns, half-finished developments stand like tombstones to a dream that no longer feels real. At the same time, Florida's labor market, once hailed as unstoppable, is showing signs of exhaustion. Tourism jobs, construction work, and service industries form the backbone of the state's economy. But when tourism falters, everything ripples outward. In the last quarter alone, over 40% of hospitality workers in certain counties reported reduced hours or temporary layoffs. Restaurants that thrived on the high season are closing earlier, trimming staff, or disappearing entirely. The irony is brutal. A state built on the promise of sunshine and jobs now finds itself grappling with economic storms of its own making. And this isn't a random downer. Economists warn that Florida's growth model, dependent on perpetual real estate appreciation and tourism, is inherently fragile. The moment those pillars shake, everything above begins to crumble. Then comes the political dimension, perhaps the most dangerous fault line of all. As living costs rise and residents face impossible insurance bills, the blame game intensifies. State officials downplay the crisis, insisting it's temporary. But Floridians on the ground see something different. People moving out, local economies shrinking, and the fabric of small communities tearing apart. Social media tells the story politicians won't. Viral videos of abandoned neighborhoods, flooded condos, and families sleeping in their cars after being priced out of rentals. Florida's image as the land of eternal sunshine is turning into a cautionary tale of what happens when an economy expands faster than it can sustain itself. Still, the question lingers. Is this truly the biggest collapse in U.S. history, or just a long overdue correction? Some analysts argue Florida's fundamentals are too large to fail, that migration, innovation, and investment will eventually balance the scales. Others warn that climate, cost, and corruption are a toxic mix, setting the stage for an irreversible decline. The truth likely lies in between. What's clear is that Florida stands at a crossroads, and the decisions made in the next 5 years will define not just its future, but the nation's understanding of what boom and bust really means. If the Sunshine State can't weather this storm, if the beach is empty, the homes stay vacant, and the dream evaporates, then perhaps we'll finally realize the warning signs were always there, glowing under the Florida sun. The collapse of the American paradise. Florida has always been more than a state. It's a brand, a fantasy, a glowing mirage that convinced millions they could find happiness in the reflection of turquoise water and the warmth of eternal sun. But every dream, no matter how beautiful, carries a shadow. And in Florida, that shadow has finally caught up. The collapse we're witnessing isn't just financial, it's existential. It's the slow implosion of a myth built on fragile sand. For decades, Florida sold itself as the land of no limits. Developers promised fortunes, retirees promised comfort, politicians promised stability. But behind that glittering promise, there was always a countdown ticking quietly. One storm, one insurance failure, one migration shift away from everything crumbling. And now, that clock has hit zero. Drive through Miami, Tampa, Naples, or even the once booming Panhandle coast, and you'll see the story written everywhere. The empty storefronts, the half-finished condos, the quiet desperation of families who once believed they'd found paradise. Real estate agents who used to juggle phone calls from out-of-state buyers now sit in empty offices, watching the phone that never rings. Restaurants that survived hurricanes are closing under the weight of insurance premiums that cost more than their rent. And homeowners? They're trapped. Trapped by homes they can't sell, by costs they can't afford, by promises that no longer mean anything. What began as a ripple has turned into a tidal wave, and Florida's foundation, built on tourism, speculation, and denial, is starting to wash away. But this story runs deeper than economics. It's about identity. Florida has always represented the American obsession with reinvention, the belief that if you move far enough south, you can leave your problems behind. But the problems followed. Rising seas, soaring costs, social divides, political battles that turned neighbors into enemies. The state became a mirror reflecting everything America doesn't want to face. Its addiction to endless growth, its refusal to plan for the future, its belief that optimism can outbuild reality. And as the tides rise and the insurance companies flee, that mirror is cracking. The reflection is breaking. The truth is surfacing. Yet collapse doesn't happen all at once. It creeps. It starts with a story, then a statistic, then a storm. One year the hurricanes hit harder. The next, the policies vanish. Then the tourists come for shorter stays. Then the Canadians stop coming altogether. And by the time the numbers still look record-breaking on paper, the reality on the ground has already shifted beyond repair. Behind every closed restaurant, every empty hotel, every family leaving for Georgia or the Carolinas, there's a quiet revolution unfolding, a mass realization that the Florida dream has become unsustainable. And that's the tragedy of it. The dream didn't die in a dramatic explosion. It drowned slowly in debt, denial, and water. Still, not everyone is giving up. In small towns along the Gulf Coast, locals are fighting back, not with money, but with grit. Communities are creating self-funded insurance pools, volunteer response teams, and rebuilding networks. Farmers are turning flooded land into aquaculture projects. Neighbors are sharing power through solar co-ops. Out of the ruins, a new kind of Florida is forming. Not the one sold in glossy brochures, but one built by people who refuse to leave. It's humbler, rougher, but real. For the first time in decades, Floridians are rediscovering what built this place in the first place: survival. And that might be the greatest irony of all. That collapse is forcing Florida to remember what made it strong. Not the glitz, not the investors, not the politics, but the people. The ones who stayed through the hurricanes, who rebuilt when the world said it couldn't be done, who looked at a flooded street and said, "We'll make it work." Maybe that's what the rest of America needs to see. Because Florida's collapse isn't just about one state falling apart. It's a warning written in sunlight for every place chasing unchecked growth. California's droughts, Nevada's heat, New York's cost of living, they're all part of the same story. Florida just happens to be the first chapter that's impossible to ignore. But every ending holds a beginning. Even as the waves claim neighborhoods and investors pull out, there's something profoundly human happening in the wreckage. People are waking up. They're questioning the systems that failed them. They're realizing that progress built on denial always collapses, and that sustainability isn't a buzzword, it's survival. Florida's crisis may be the blueprint for the next generation's awakening. When the lights go out on luxury, what remains is resilience. And when resilience becomes the currency of a people, they can build again, stronger, wiser, and maybe this time, for the right reasons. As the final rays of sunlight fade over the Atlantic, the coastline glows, golden, haunting, and uncertain. The skyscrapers still shimmer, the waves still crash, but the illusion is gone. What's left is a truth too big to ignore. Paradise isn't a place. It's a balance. And once that balance breaks, no sunshine can blind you from what's real. The question now isn't whether Florida will survive, but what kind of Florida will emerge from the wreckage. Will it rise as a model of adaptation, or sink beneath the weight of its own denial? One thing is certain, the world is watching. Every investor, every politician, every dreamer who once believed in the Florida miracle is waiting to see if the state that built itself on sunshine can survive the storm it created. Because if Florida falls, it won't just take its beaches with it. It will take America's confidence, the belief that growth can go on forever, that paradise can exist without cost. The collapse of Florida is a story about the end of illusion and the beginning of accountability. So as the water climbs higher and the lights of Miami flicker in the distance, ask yourself, what happens when the most desirable place in America becomes the first to fall? Maybe this isn't the end of Florida. Maybe it's the end of pretending. Tell me what you think. Is Florida facing its rebirth or its reckoning?